that we're not taken advantage of by other Western or other highly developed economic nations. When you look at this, what do you see? Do you see an economic mistake, or do you see a powerful negotiation tool?
Well, it's hard to tell from what's coming out of the White House what their true intentions are. Initially, it was from anything from addressing the imbalance of the trade deficit to the intellectual property theft to just a fairness in trade. It is a number of many issues that they seem to be taking up right now, and their biggest tool seems to be tariffs. You're right. Tariffs have shown that they can't necessarily work, and free traders should be worried that we are heading in the direction of less free trade. One study predicted that the initial list of these 50 billion worth of tariffs could actually put upwards of 134,000 American jobs at risk.
Right, and I think that's the scary part, and what a lot of conservatives. Why a lot of conservatives have the initial reaction of, oh, whoa, don't do tariffs. We've gone down this road before. We've seen how many Americans lose their jobs over these. This is kind of elementary economics. Don't do this. Then we see how some of President Trump's negotiation tactics, even the unconventional ones, have worked. And, at least for me, it gives me pause to say, well, he's right. I mean, even our allies take advantage of us in regards to trade. We have all these trade deficits with nations that we really shouldn't have trade deficits with. Maybe this is the only way to fix that. And let me ask you too. Senator Marco Rubio over the weekend said that these tariffs on China are different, that they're not the typical tariffs. He said that they are because of they are a theft tax. He called them because of how much intellectual property China steals on an ongoing basis from the United States. Let me ask you: is Senator Rubio correct in his analysis that it's different because China is actually, violating the morals and ethics of trading with us?
Well, Chinese companies are found to be the biggest takers of American intellectual property, the biggest thieves in the international community. I don't believe necessarily that these tariffs are the right process to get to that, because we're not specifically targeting Chinese entities. We're not targeting the people that we know have stolen intellectual property. We're just targeting the things that Americans like to buy from China in these high-tech industries that Chinese companies tend to steal more from. So we're not necessarily taking a targeted approach, and what's going to happen is that's going to end up harming Americans more than it is the Chinese. Now, in the midterm, the Chinese can sort of, take the pressure from these tariffs and not necessarily be hurt and necessarily be forced to change like I think the Trump administration wants them to. Addressing trade deals isn't necessarily the same as addressing, North Korea, for instance. We live in a very complex trading world where, everyone's trading with one another in multi-layers, and China in the midterm, again, can sort of take the brunt of these costs.
Right, and this is what I wanted to ask you about. This is from the Washington Post. They were writing about the tariffs. They said the administration's report in March, there was an administrative report in March that complained China had forced foreign companies to surrender their tech secrets in return for market access and had pilfered other advanced U.S. technologies through a campaign of cyber theft and investment in Silicon Valley startups. And that brings me back to my point that I made in the introduction about $3 million, or $3 billion, that's billion with a B. That's how much money the Chinese steal from American companies every single year when it comes to high-tech products. They have this goal, Made in China 2025, where they want to be dominant in the high-tech industry. And in order to do so, they're using underhanded methods. They're stealing, they're bribing, they're, all sorts of corruption here. What would a good trade deal with China look like then? What is President Trump trying to get from them where we're not being taken advantage of, but our workers simultaneously wouldn't be hurt?
Right. I would be careful not to conflate the theft issue with the unfairness. The theft issue is an outright immoral practice that I think we should target these companies that we know have used or stolen or used known stolen intellectual property and sanction them from the American financial market. We saw recently with Chinese telecommunications company ZTE that target sanctions are very effective in making them change and punish and pay for the crimes that they committed. Unfair, these forced transfer technologies, these aren't new though. These are known. Companies themselves know this, and they've been doing it for 20 or 30 years because they want access to the Chinese markets. And that's an individual choice that they have made And that's not necessarily something that the U.S. government should necessarily get their hands into.
Unless it's a national security issue, I think that was the argument from the administration, that some of this tech gives the Chinese either an unfair advantage or a dangerous advantage in the technology sphere. I think that's an interesting perspective, though, Riley. The targeted sanctions or the targeted tariffs on the companies that we know that are stealing intellectual property from the United States. Like I said, I'm sort of torn on this issue myself. On one hand, I don't think tariffs are a good idea. On the other hand, President Trump's proved so far that he's been a pretty solid negotiator, and I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt to a certain extent, with a dose of skepticism. But it'll be interesting to see how this one turns out, and I guess the tariffs on the Canadians, if he follows through with that. We'll have to have you back if something actually goes through there. Thanks for being here today. All right, we've got a good one for you next. Democrats are so mad about the Inspector General report. They spent the whole weekend being outraged about an immigration policy that started under a Democratic president, but they're blaming Trump for it. That's because the IG report was so damning to the FBI and the anti-Trump bias in the Hillary Clinton investigation. What else were Democrats supposed to say? Hit me up on Twitter at Liz_Wheeler over the break, and we will see you back here in just a moment.